everyone, and welcome to another episode of Read and Write with Natasha. So, today I have with me fantasy author Danielle Orsino. So, the creative work of storytelling has been with Danielle ever since she was a child. So Danielle M. Orsino, she loved martial arts, and she had her nursing career, and then one day, like any others, what happened is she was treating one of her patients, and then she realized that she wanted some distraction, and that's how she delved into the world of fantasy. So Danielle took it upon herself to tell her patients a story, a fantastical narrative that would leave the confines of the IV room walls and land upon a page. Before she knew it, what started as an imaginative tale to pass the time turned into a book, followed by an entire series. Here we go, The Birth of Faith. So, wow, Danielle, thank you for joining me. What a tale, huh? So you were a nurse, and then you decided to go into the fantasy world. So, welcome. And if you can tell me about your transition, if you can start how you went from being a nurse to being an author of fantasy books.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, first and foremost. It was a bit of an unorthodox journey. I didn't set out and think, oh, one day I'm going to be an author. I was a martial artist, competitive, transferred into nursing, and then I just met a patient who just needed a distraction. And as we were having a conversation, he mentioned little factoids about himself that after a year of treating
Okay.
him, I just didn't know about. And that just turned into a conversation. As we were talking, he just said, we made a comment about Lyme disease, which is what he was being treated for. And I said, oh, well, you know where Lyme comes from. And we went down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories and all this stuff. And for some reason, out of my mouth came, no, the Fae. I don't know to this day why I said it. I wasn't reading any books about Fae, nothing like that. I was actually on a vampire kick. And he looked at me and he went, well, who are the Fae? And I just started telling this story off the top of my head, just making it up. And he just settled back in his chair and we just started kind of telling this story. And from there, it took on a life of its own, but I still didn't think I would be an author. I was going to go to physician assistant school. I had like my life planned out. I was going to go pump some faces full of Restylane. You know, it was all set. And he kept encouraging me, go home, write this down. Because every day he came in, I told him another chapter. And we just kind of flowed. And he was the one who was like, go home and write this down. I'm telling you. And I was like, yeah. And then eventually I took his advice and wrote it down. And the story kind of came from there. So it was just the universe, kind of as I said.
And who are the Fae?
The Fae in this version of, the Fae are fallen angels, or, the Fellowship Aegis of Earth, the Defenders of Earth. In this story, they are angels who one side did not get involved in the war with Lucifer. They were sent by the Creator to prep the earth for the Creator's great next experiment, which is humans. And then the other side are the Power Brigade angels, who are the foot soldiers of the archangels. So they were actually fighting. And then both sides are promised, you're going to go home, of course. As soon as your job is done, of course you're coming back to the Shining Kingdom. And then one day they both hear the gates lock. And they can't go home. And they're just like, whoa, wait, what just happened? And they can't get an answer. So each side blames the other one. And they develop into the Court of Light and Dark. And they then take the acronym of Fae. Some say the Fallen Angels of Earth. Some say the Fellowship Aegis of Earth. The Court of Light calls it that as the Defenders of Earth, since they were there protecting it from day one. And then as they sit here, they kind of watch humanity develop. And some take on more of a nurturing aspect. And others say, no, we're not going to do that. And, things develop. But the only thing they both agree on is that as they are worshipped by the humans as the primal kind of pagan gods and goddesses, they find that they get power from that worship. Their elemental gifts and, defending gifts kind of expand. So now they realize human worship equals power, and they don't feel there's enough for both sides. So a war breaks out, and we kind of watch what happens.
Oh, and I love the outfit, by the way. And are you
Thank
dressed
you.
as who? Are you dressed as a
I'm
fae, or
I'm
like
giving a
what?
little Queen
If you
Aurora
can tell us a bit out,
realness.
about your outfit. Yeah.
Yeah, I like to. I'm a cosplayer to begin with, so the
Okay.
idea of dressing as the Fae whenever I can, bring a little sparkle into my life, never
Okay.
hurts. So I always dress up as characters or as a Fae whenever I do interviews or whenever I can because it makes me smile.
And where did you make it yourself, or did you purchase? Like, where did you get the
The
outfit
dress I
from?
made, the dress I actually made. This I
Oh
did.
wow.
The shoulder piece. This piece is from Aconite Designs,
Okay.
and then the crown is actually Aurora's crown that Enchanting Earth made after she read the
Okay.
book. Jamie is a crystal shop owner. She actually read the book, fell in
Oh
love, and then
wow.
decided Aurora needs a crown and made the crown, and now she sells it in the store as Aurora's crown. So
Ah,
anybody who
that's
loves the Fae
nice.
can have a piece of the Fae.
And it looks like the cover as well. It's similar except for the horns, I guess.
Yes, I actually, yeah, I have that headpiece. That is Lady Serena, who is
Okay.
Queen Aurora's best friend.
Ah, okay. This is amazing. So, what influenced you? Like, how did you delve into this world? Growing up, what kind of books did you read that made you gravitate towards fantasy?
I don't know that I necessarily went toward fantasy consciously. I didn't I didn't know that's where I was going. But
Okay.
I'm a huge comic book geek. That's
Ah,
just
okay.
where I do, as a kid I read like Secret of Nim and things like that, which I enjoyed, but Chris Claremont, I
Okay.
said, is one of my biggest influences. I love comic books. George Perez. I was always into the comic book side, and that probably influenced me more writing this than anything else. A lot of the
Okay.
characters in the book, King Jarbok, things like that, they can be traced back to specific characters, from comic books like Magneto from X-Men. King Jarbok and Magneto are very, very similar in the sense that you may not agree with their methods, but they are doing what they feel is right for their kin. So
Okay.
you might not agree with them, but it's there. So a lot
Okay.
of times, even in my style, I leave little Easter eggs,
Okay.
and that really comes from comic books more than anything else.
Ah, interesting. So this is the first in a three-book series, correct?
I've actually finished seven altogether now. Volume one
Oh
is
wow.
complete. I've
Okay.
finished it plus one novella, so there's eight. It's Locked Out of Heaven, Thine Eyes of Mercy, From the Ashes, Kingdom Come, A Fae is Done, and Forgive Us. That's the six in volume one. Then there's a novella, Fire, Ice, Acid, and Heart, which is a dragon tournament, which you could read on the side or in between. But volume one is complete now, and I'm actually already working on volume two. But
Oh
yeah,
wow.
kind of just exploded, and I
I
didn't
see
really
that.
know where I was going with it. I'd like to tell you I had this whole plan, but nah, there wasn't a plan. If you want to learn how not to write a book, come talk to me. I can give you all the insight on that.
Okay.
But no, it went. But I knew as I finished Forgive Us, this was the end. Like that was volume one. Volume one was done at that point because
Okay.
I did jump genres at the end. I jumped more to urban fantasy and took it into modern world. So at the end of Forgive Us, there's four little short stories that take you through time to
Okay.
wind up at the end in modern day, in New
Okay.
York, modern day, to lead you into the next set of characters. So I did
Okay.
kind of give this little timeline jump, and that's when I knew, okay, volume one is done. We're going to move on to some new characters. We'll bring back some old favorites, but it's a whole new set.
Oh. So what is your writing routine? Do you still work as a nurse?
No, I don't. I'm a writer now. I don't work as a nurse anymore. I was good with nurse and healthcare, kind of burned you out pretty
Okay.
quick. I did think I was going to go to PA school. I got in, and it was all this like, yes, I'm going. And then they hit you with how much it costs. And then you're like, oh, okay. I was not planning on $250,000 up front. So let me give this writing thing a shot. That's when all of a sudden I turned to my patient and went, so you think this make a good book, huh? It turned quick. But
Okay.
my writing routine for the first couple books, I wrote all simultaneously by hand. I
Okay.
did not have a plan. I just sat down, started writing, and
Okay.
then I'd pick up a journal, write, and then I'd be like, oh, people are going to want to know how this happened. And I pick up another journal and start writing. So that was how I started. And I still kind of stick to that in the sense that all the books are handwritten first.
Okay.
That's what I do everything. So then I take it to the computer.
Oh wow. So you're a full typewriter now.
Yeah, I do. I write and then I do social media work and stuff like that for my publisher as well and marketing.
Ah, okay.
So
Ah,
I
okay.
do, I do that. And then with another partner of mine, C.R. Rice, who's another amazing young adult author, run the pop up bookshop with her, where we take it through the GalaxyCon circuit, introducing indie authors to an audience maybe they
Okay.
wouldn't get a chance. And we run that as well 4 or 5 times a year,
Okay.
when we go through GalaxyCon. So I have other things that keep me within the publishing author realm, plus my
Okay.
writing.
Oh wow. Uh, yeah, I'm interested in how writers can sustain themselves. And it's these days the Stephen Kings of the world who can live off their writing are very few, right? And so I'm really interested in the side gigs, the all the stuff that make authors pursue their dream, right? um, so that's good to know that you do other publishing related things, and I think that's a really nice blend of both. Excuse me.
Yeah, I
um
have to keep it in the realm, I think. This way you stay relevant too.
oh yeah, true, true, I like this. So how many hours do you write a day?
Depends on what I'm working on. I just turned in a novella probably about a month and a half ago. Yeah, about that.
Okay.
And that one took me a lot longer than I thought it would. I had all these
Okay.
great ideas, but actually, and I know that I would spend, depending on when kind of it hit me, 3.5, 4 hours trying to get things in and out. But if I'm really like for volume two, when I really get something, I can spend hours just writing. It just kind of depends. But I also don't have a set time where I'm like, okay, I'm going to write from 9 to 5. I don't do that. There's always a journal by my bedside because for some reason,
Okay.
3 a.m. is when these characters decide to come to life in my head and knock on it and go, "Excuse me, tell my story now."
Yeah.
I don't know why, but that's when the best ideas come. So there's always a journal. I have journals all over my house. My husband
Okay.
thinks I'm crazy because it something pops in my head where I'm watching TV and I'm like, oh, that's that plot hole. And then it's like I need something to write it down, or I get that hint of something. Like literally, I think I was sitting in the bath last night and I'm like, I had an idea for a series. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that's what I want to do. And then I'm looking
Yeah.
around, I'm like, where is, so it was one of those where it's like, remember, remember, don't forget, don't forget, don't forget. So I can't really say, oh, I know people have processes and they're like, this is my
Yeah.
process. No, I'm not one of those. It's just
Okay.
when it hits, the Real Housewives are on in the background, RuPaul's Drag Race. Like I can't write in silence. I need the chaos.
Okay.
It just helps my brain work.
Oh wow. So how are the books doing in terms of the sales? If you don't mind sharing with us.
Oh no, it's hard to stand out. I was on the Tamron Hall show
Oh
last
wow.
March.
Good for you.
Yeah, March. Yes. And that was very helpful. Obviously you see a bump and then every time the show replays, you see another bump. And doing the podcast, things like that, it definitely helps. I remember the first time I never knew you could check, like, I didn't know Kindle had a bestseller list for your niche. And the first time, like, I
Uh
got the alert, somebody was like, oh, do you know your number like 50 on the Kindle bestseller for like dragons? I was just like, what? And like,
oh
I didn't
wow.
know this existed. You're screenshotting it everywhere. And you're like, did you see
Okay.
this?
Okay.
So I've made the bestseller list a couple times now for my different niches and stuff, which is awesome. And I've been really excited about that. So I've made like little lists here and there about like the best Fae books you're not reading and stuff like that. So that's been really, really cool. I've gotten, you know, shout outs on Instagram from like David Mack,
Oh, wow.
from Marvel and things. So it's been really great. The response has been awesome. Obviously, we all want to be on a bestseller list. You want to see your name on USA Today, New York Times, but then the more you learn about these lists and you realize, well, it's not exactly about sales. It's kind of who you know. You're just like, look, I just want people, I want to make money obviously off of it, but I've learned that it takes time, a lot of time, which, everybody thinks when you're first getting into this world that you're just going to be that viral sensation. We all want
Yeah.
to be that.
Yeah.
You really think like it's just going to take
Yeah.
that one person. Yeah. And then reality hits you and you go, oh, like all the overnight sensations, you then dig on them and you realize, oh, they've been writing since like 2004 and they're just
Yeah.
hitting now. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, so it really didn't happen overnight. Like that's just what you're told. Like Hollywood kind of glams it up.
Yeah.
So I have to just wait my turn, but I'm getting momentum. I'm getting steam. I've done like Barnes and Noble signings, which is really
Okay.
cool. And when I go to GalaxyCon, I have people run up with my book, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're here!" And I'm like,
Oh, wow.
"I'm here." I was at GalaxyCon. I think it was Richmond, and I was dressed in cosplay as Firestar from Marvel. And I was at the booth doing something. Some girl comes up to me and like has my book, and she goes, "She's gonna be here." And she's pointing at it. And I looked at her. I went, yeah. And she goes, I'm going to get her to sign this. And I went, she's me. And then she looked at me and she looked at the book and she looked back at me. She went, oh my God, it's you. And I was like, this is so cool, but so weird because,
Yeah.
and I was so like grateful for the moment, but I'm like, she read my book. Like there's still that moment of you went out and bought my book and read it. Like
Yeah.
you still have to go, you spent money on that. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. But
Yeah.
wow. So, you know, like I said, you still want to make $1 million, but then you get a reaction like that and you're like, yeah, it's kind of worth it. Like just for
Yeah.
that moment, you're just like, this is kind of cool.
Yeah. So how did you get these high profile interviews like the Tamron Hall? How did that work out?
Uh, it was weird. One of the associate producers just happened to read my book. And then a producer on the show I
Um,
worked with years ago, the associate producer walked in with the book and they were going to do like, I think she does, the segment is called Let's Get Lit. And it's like, all the books that they're reading. And she was kind of like nervous to say anything. And then the producer went, I know her. I worked with her years ago. And that's how it just gelled. It was like one of those serendipity moments where you were just like, oh, and the girl was like, I read this book. It's really good. And then
mm,
Beth was like, I know Danielle. She's like, I can call her right now if you want. And they were
mm,
like, well, let's do a pre-interview. Like she's still got to go through everything. And they pre-interviewed me and came back and they were like, she's actually kind of cool. And so I had to still go through approvals and it just happened. It was like a minute segment on authors you should know about. And so they did my story and it was really cool. And, you know, people wrote in and was like, we want to hear more from the nurse. So, I'm hoping they'll have me back and do a more in-depth interview. But yeah, it was really cool.
very cool. What happened to the patient? I'm just curious. That started all of this.
I'm best friends with him. I talk to him every day. It's
Okay.
been 10 years and we speak every day. And volume 2 is where his literary persona is actually the hero of it. Agent Graham is my patient. So the way the whole thing
Ah.
started was he had mentioned that he was recruited by the CIA out of college. So volume 2 is actually our quote unquote story we joke about, where I made it in a Lyme disease clinic about a nurse and the CIA agent, goes undercover to find out if the nurse is a Fey human hybrid. That was the original story that we kind of talked about and I told him. So volume 2 is urban fantasy and he is Agent Graham. So how he was recruited by the CIA, all those little nuggets are in that story. So yeah, he's now a literary hero, as I call him. That's a secret agent persona. He can't wait. So when Forgive Us came out, the last short story is Graham, the first time you meet him. So I sent
Okay.
it to him and he called me right after he read it and he was like, I love it. He's like, I love Graham. I'm so excited. So he can't wait. And I'm still trying to convince him to be on the cover of that's that volume. So he would be Agent Graham, because I feel like that's, it's apropos. But we're working on it because he likes being Patient X. He likes, the
Okay.
anonymity. But we're working on it. But yeah, I talk to him all the time.
How does he feel about your success?
He's probably one of my biggest cheerleaders aside from my husband. He's he has all the books. He gives them out for Christmas gifts. Yeah, he loves it, but he doesn't tell anybody he's the patient, which I find funny. But yeah, he's been really great about it. He read most of them. He read like in the first draft stages, but volume two, obviously, he's more
Okay.
excited about because it's him. But he's been great about it, and he's very excited. So it's fun.
Has has he healed, or how is his Lyme disease going?
It's better, with Lyme. Depends on when you catch it,
Okay.
is how how you are with it. But he's much better. Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah, my husband has Lyme. But we caught it pretty early, so
Oh, good.
he's fine now.
Yeah.
Uh all right. So I want to talk about marketing. You seem like,
Okay.
really good at marketing your books. So if you want to give advice to writers, like, you can give me also an advice. Like I always try marketing different ways of doing it. What works best for you?
With marketing, I'm still always experimenting, but I find
Okay.
one, uh, there are enough readers out there for all of us. I
Okay.
think authors have gotten very competitive.
Okay.
Teaming up, C.R. Rice is an amazing author, and her and I have teamed up, and people still find that amazing that we've teamed up. They're like, but
Okay.
you guys are, and I'm like, we're what? We're allowed as women to
Okay.
lift each other up. So I think that's one thing, is it's okay to team up with another author.
Yeah.
No one's going to steal each other's readers. There's more than enough. Uh, know your brand, figure out who you are as a writer, and figure out your
Okay.
brand. You can't go out and just be like, I'm an author, I write a book, cool, that's all I do. Know your brand, know your message, and
Okay.
figure out your niche. That's the other thing. And
Okay.
understand that your publisher is probably not going to do it. They're not going to market you. It's not
Yeah.
like days where it used to be, where you used to get a big fat, like, here's your check, and then you just go write the books, we'll handle the rest. That's not it. You don't have to be an expert on every platform, social media. Pick one, know it, stick to it. You don't have to be on the next big thing. Like, everybody's like, TikTok's the way to go. Oh my God. I'm not on TikTok. It's just like, Instagram's what I do. That's it. I,
Okay.
they made me get a Facebook page. I'll be honest. I don't even check it. It's like, yeah, I've got a presence, but Instagram's what I know. I
Okay.
don't jump to the newest, latest thing. I stick
Okay.
to one thing, unless it's a dinosaur. That's what I do. So I think it's more of knowing who you are, knowing your brand, knowing your audience, and not being afraid to kind of expand your audience. For a long time, I was told I could not be young adult, because I challenge religion in the book. So it was like, you
Okay.
cannot be young adult. And I'm like, but
Okay.
why not? And then I went into a Barnes and Noble recently, probably about 6 months ago, and they were like, please jump into the young adult category. They said, because we're tired of having moms come in here throwing us Sarah J. Moss and saying, why is my kid reading this? I'm getting in trouble when they're trying to do a book report on it. And he was like, I
Okay.
would love a Faye book that
Okay.
has no smut. He's like, I
Okay.
would love to put you in that category. So I went back and like really pushed my publisher to say, just try me in young adult and see what happens. And then I started seeing more sales and things like that. So I think you have to be your own advocate at times and do your research.
Okay.
So that would be another kind of way to go. And you have to try new things. Being on the cover I had my own version of what was going to happen. Being a cosplayer, just jumping into that realm and saying, I'm going to take this risk, was another thing that I tried, and it's paid off. These covers were all limited edition. The deal we made was, once the first run was done, that's it. We're going back to typeset. And I have people now like writing the publisher saying, no, 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 put her back on the cover. We don't want the typeset cover. Go back to the cosplay, because a lot of people thought it was going to be a failed experiment. So
Mm.
you just have to be willing to try different things and go out there. And when everybody's like, nobody does that, because when we did these covers, there were a lot of people who were like, an author on the cover and it's not nonfiction. And I was like, oh, that's right.
So this one, is that you?
That's me.
Oh wow.
That's
Yeah,
me on the cover.
it's the blonde hair that kind of threw me. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad didn't even recognize me. Yeah. I play a different
Okay.
character on the covers. Uh, I'm on all of them except for the novella because that's a dragon. But yeah, and they said we'll do one run like that, and we'll see. And so when they just changed it back to typeset, and there's people writing and going, no, 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 put her back. We want her back on the cover. And a lot of people were
Okay.
like, it's weird because it's not a nonfiction, it's a nonfiction,
Yeah.
it's a fiction book, but it should be nonfiction. And now people are like, no, that was really cool. So I think you just have
Yeah.
to be willing to take some chances and realize
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's your words. You have to commit 100%. So
Yeah.
take the chances.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you talk to your audience on Instagram DMs, or like how do you interact with them? What is
Yeah, if they DM me, I always respond. I also have a football podcast, so I'm active. We have people like call in with that, and sometimes they have book questions, so I've answered
Okay.
those. But no, I'm very active on Instagram. It's me answering. It's very
Okay.
rarely not me. You know,
Okay.
I can't think of any. I think there's maybe one or two times when I was just busy. I wasn't able to get to it. But no, that's me. I do Instagram lives, things like that, and I
Okay.
know everybody who reaches out. I'm pretty active with the readers that are constant, so I know
Okay.
who they are,
Okay.
and I'll always answer a question. I don't
Okay.
shy away from controversy either. When things have happened, I've been one to step up and just say, okay, this is what's going on, guys. Here we are. This is where we're at. Whatever, and I've taken it head on. So I love talking to the readers.
How many followers do you have?
About 12,000.
Oh wow. Um,
But a
that's
lot of them were following me from cosplay. So they were, these
uh
were people who knew me from cosplay, and a lot of them just were jumped in. And that's one thing I could say about the cosplay community is that they're very supportive, very supportive.
mm,
So
mm,
when one of us tries something new, everybody jumps in and is like, all right, cool, you're trying something, go for it. The pom poms are out. And, when I've done podcasts for like Cosplay Alliance and I've been guests on, they're right there to plug the book because
mm.
they know, you're making that chance.
So the number one sales come from where, you think? From like media appearances, or is it from
It's usually word of mouth. I don't find book tours do as much as people think.
okay.
But it will be a podcast that'll usually push it. Uh, I think sometimes it depends if where the media appearance is. That really depends. If I've done a GalaxyCon, I will see a
Okay.
jump because somebody's walked by the booth, they've taken a card, or they've seen us on a panel,
Okay.
and they've gone from there. And it's if they didn't buy it at the event, because I can't sell a Kindle at an event, obviously,
Yeah.
then they'll go and they'll purchase it because people love their ebooks. I don't
Mm,
sell those
mm.
at events, so we will
Yeah.
usually see a jump after a GalaxyCon event.
Oh, interesting. So your publishing journey, how did you find your publisher, and do you have an agent? How did that work?
Initially, for Locked Out of Heaven, for the first edition, I had I knew somebody who wanted to rep me, and so
Okay.
I let them rep me, and I had an offer from one of the big three for their metaphysical imprint, and I
Okay.
was they had made the offer, and they said, but we only signed 2 to 3 nonfiction books, I mean fiction books a year. They said
Okay.
we just closed our the third one. They said, so if you come back in January, we'll sign you. We want some changes, but we'll sign you. At that point, it was March. I didn't want to wait a year. So I was like, all right, I'll think about it, whatever. And then a friend of mine who had a nonfiction publishing house said, you know what, we'll take a chance. We'll publish you as our first fiction book. That was a
Okay.
mistake. I said yes. We released the first edition of Locked Out of Heaven, and I was with them for about a year. And then I just wasn't, the book was doing well. There was no problem. But the process of getting the book out, they didn't know how to edit a fiction book. There was editing mistakes, grammatical errors, things like that. Uh, it just wasn't the right place. And then I happened to be doing a podcast, Drinking with Authors.
Okay.
And that's where Four Horsemen met me. And after the interview, she had already heard rumblings of the other publisher. And she's like, are you happy with them? And I'm like, yeah, everything's great. And she's like, yeah, it's not what I heard. And she's like, we do fiction. Come with us. And so they offered me a contract, I think a week later. And
Oh.
it took me about 2 or 3 months of hemming and hawing if I was going to sign. And then I signed with them.
And you're still with
So,
them.
yeah, I didn't do a lot of querying. I think the only place I queried was DAW with
Okay.
Penguin. That was the only place that I was like really considering going at one point
Okay.
because, everybody wants to be a Penguin. So I had considered that at one point, but that was really it.
Okay. Okay. So what are you working on these days?
Right now, I just finished, like I said, the novella, which is still within volume one, same characters, and then I am finishing volume two. I'm working on that. I have 3 books in that volume, and then I am discussing with 2 Marvel, I'll call them icons, that want to write the forwards for volume two books, for 2 of them. So I'm talking to them right now to see if their schedules will allow for it, and if it will, that will be amazing. If it won't, c'est la vie. We'll figure out another time we can work together. So I'm working on that, and I'm doing panels for a possible graphic novel for an iteration for book one, Locked Out of Heaven. Looking at that right now, and then I'm looking. I've done some oracle cards
Hmm.
for that. So I've got a couple things in the hopper, and then I'm always, we're always with the pop-up bookshop. We have GalaxyCon Columbus, December 1st through the 3rd in Columbus, Ohio, where we'll be with a bunch of other authors that are great. And we'll see, people there, which are always, we have readers that come from everywhere just to come to the GalaxyCons and see us. And we do a bunch of panels, cocktails with creatives, and all these great things. So we'll be at that. I'm always getting that ready with CR Rice. And then CR and I are doing a crossover event between our 2 worlds, between the realm and the veil. We're doing that, and we're working on that right now as well.
Wow, you're busy. So
I'm
for
trying to stay busy.
good for you. So for anyone who wants to get into that genre to start writing fantasy novels, fantasy books, what kind of advice would you give them?
I think it would be the same for anybody who just wants to start writing in general. The first thing is to not think of fantasy or writing as anything more than interpersonal dynamics. When you write,
Okay.
that's all it really is. Whether you put a pair of horns on them or some scales,
Okay.
it's really all it is. In my books, a lot of the characters are people I know and
Okay.
interactions I've had with them. So whether I throw a tail on them, in the case of Lady Serena, she's inspired by my best friend from high school, Jennifer. So there's a chapter in Locked Out of Heaven called Girl Talk. That's me
Okay.
and Jen sitting on the beach when we thought we knew everything at 16 years old, how we all are. And, it's really deep. That's the same
Yeah.
thing. So I just pulled from real life. I think if you start with that, then you can decide whatever fantastic world you want to put it in. If
Okay.
you're going to stick in fantasy, make sure though you have the world building. Think about, the magic system and all that stuff, because fantasy readers will pull you apart.
Yeah.
They still want it to be logical.
Okay.
It still has to work. You can't just be like, oh, the coin flipped and it turned the whole world upside down. Well, why? Like, they want to know, okay, what's the magic
Okay.
involved? You
Okay.
still have to do research. I think there's a misconception that if you write fantasy, there's no research. You still have to have a map. You still have to give them the basic information, Like, think of it as
Mm.
if you told somebody, oh, you have to go to the store. Okay, you're going to go down here. You're going to make a left. You're going to do that. Like, they still want direction to get there. You can't just
Okay.
be like, oh, it's a world. It doesn't work that way. You still have to world
Yeah.
build and kind of go down the street. I did that even with my dragons. I couldn't just have dragons that breathe fire and everybody was like, well, there they are. They breathe fire. I did a lot of research to make sure the dragons were plausible. Like if I was ever on Mythbusters, I don't have to be confirmed, just plausible. Like they just have to
Uh,
exist. And
okay.
here's why they breathe fire. It can't just be magical. I
Okay.
hate that.
Okay.
It's like, why? Give them reasons.
Okay.
Uh, go from there.
And how do you do the research? Like Google, or do you like go to the library? Like how is
I
your
went
research?
everywhere. I also
Okay.
watched really bad fantasy movies, really bad
Okay.
ones,
Okay.
because
Okay.
sometimes the really bad ones show you what not to do, but they also have nuggets of like what's good. So I did that. I watched really bad ones. I watched a lot of 80s ones because sometimes those have the best story veins and you can kind of see where the good ideas were. You got to read a lot, obviously.
Mm.
Um, for my dragons, I worked with a mechanical engineer, a physics professor, and my vet, Gil Stanzione. I sat down. I went in with him one day when my dog had an appointment, and I literally said, I have an idea for a dragon. And I remember taking his glasses off, and he went, oh my God, Danielle, what? He was just like, what now? And I said, I want to build it from the digestive system out. I don't care what they look
Mm.
like yet. I want to start with their stomach. And he went, what? Okay. And I remember he opened up, he was like, I'm going to be late at the next appointment. And he closed the door and he went, go back to this idea. And I said, what if I build it from bacteria? And he was like, we're on to something now. And we wound up sitting there talking, and that's how I started. Then I moved on to, I went to a professor at Westchester Community College, talked to him about, I want them to fly, but I'm going to base it on the albatross theory of gliding. And then he presented it to his classes, their midterms. Once I found, okay, they can fly, but they can only be as big as a giraffe. Now I went to Pandy Van, who's this amazing dragon illustrator. Now I could figure out what do they look like. So I took it in stages, and that's
Oh
how I did the
wow.
research. And I read a lot of stuff on dragons. I mean, a lot of stuff on dragons,
What did you read?
to the point where I also bought like I went to Michael's and I bought like all the little figures, the action figures, and I played with them to figure out like how do they move? What do they do? But probably took way too much time on my dragons, to be honest. But at the end of the day, I was proud of them, and I felt like, okay, if somebody reads this, they're not going to be like, they're dragons. Okay, they breathe fire, whatever. It was like, oh, I've got dragons that breathe fire, ice, and acid. Cool. I got some good dragons that I can now write stories about down the line, and it gave me a good base.
Oh wow. Fascinating. So before we conclude, where do people find your books? Work on your website or on Amazon? What is the best place to get your books?
You can get the books on it's at Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, Target.com, Bookshop.org, Kobo, Scribed. Basically, wherever you get your books, you can find them. They're in stores, they're online. You can always check birthofthefae.com. And then you can follow me on Instagram at birthofthefae_novel. And that's where all the latest information is. Locked Out of Heaven is on Audible. It's produced by Skyboat Media. I have two phenomenal narrators. So if you're into your audiobooks, you can check it out there.
Ah, fascinating. Okay, great. I love audiobooks. I listen to audiobooks all the time when I walk my dog and doing chores.
I love audiobooks.
I know, it's just such a time saver. Um,
Yeah.
any last word before we conclude to anyone who like an
Uh,
aspiring writer, any
uh, just write the story that you want to tell. Don't write what you think is the next Game of Thrones, the next Twilight. Just write the
yeah.
story authentically that you want to tell, and the rest will follow. It'll all fall into place. Don't write by committee. Just write whatever you want to write and then let it go. Just put it out there because you
Yeah.
can't edit what's not on paper.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. Well, thank you very much. This has been fascinating, especially the research part. Oh my God. This is like really blew my mind. Best luck, and thank you very much for joining us today. And for anyone who's listening or watching, thank you for joining us and, for spending an hour with us. And until we meet again.
Thank you.